My wife called me an idiot in front of everyone at the bar, then said, "Calm down, I love you," like that would fix everything. That was the moment I realized the woman I'd built a fortune supporting didn't respect me at all. But Nicole had no idea who she was really messing with. See, when you're a contractor who renovates million-dollar mansions, you learn how to tear things down piece by piece. And sometimes, that's exactly what a cheating wife deserves. My name is Trevor Blair. I'm 45 years old, and I've spent the last 15 years building one of the most successful luxury renovation companies in Phoenix. When wealthy folks want their mansions restored or their penthouses redesigned, they call me. I've got the connections, the crew, and the reputation that opens doors most contractors only dream about. That Friday night at Murphy's Tavern should have been a celebration. We were there with our usual crew, Mike and Sarah from my company, Nicole's work friends from the design firm, and a few neighbors we'd grown close to over the years. I just landed the biggest contract of my career, renovating a tech billionaire's estate in Scottsdale. $6 million project, 18 months of guaranteed work. I was telling everyone about the insane features this guy wanted: a wine cellar that descended 3 stories underground, smart glass that could turn opaque with voice commands, heated floors throughout the entire 15,000 square foot mansion. Everyone was laughing, asking questions, genuinely excited for me. Everyone except Nicole. She sat there nursing her third martini, rolling her eyes every time I mentioned another detail. When I got to the part about the indoor infinity pool that overlooked the valley, she finally snapped. "God, Trevor, you sound like such an idiot," Nicole said, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "Nobody cares about your little construction stories." The laughter died instantly. I felt every pair of eyes turn toward us, the awkward silence pressing down like a weight. Mike looked uncomfortable. Sarah stared at her drink, and I just sat there, stunned. Nicole must have realized what she'd done, because her expression softened immediately. She reached across the table, grabbing my hand. "Calm down, honey," she said quickly, her voice suddenly sweet. "I love you, okay? I'm just tired from work." But the damage was done. For the first time in our 12 years together, I saw Nicole for who she really was. This wasn't about being tired or stressed. This was about respect, and she clearly had none left for me. I forced a smile, nodded, and changed the subject. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The woman I'd helped rebuild after her messy divorce. The woman whose design business I'd funded when banks wouldn't give her a loan. The woman I trusted with everything. She'd just shown me exactly what she thought of the man who'd made her success possible. The drive home from Murphy's was dead silent, except for the hum of my truck's engine. Nicole stared out the passenger window, acting like nothing had happened, scrolling through her phone with that same casual indifference she'd shown all evening. But I couldn't stop replaying the moment, couldn't shake the look of contempt that had flashed across her face. When we got home to our custom-built house in North Scottsdale, the one I designed and built with my own hands, the one that showcased every skill I'd learned in 20 years of construction, Nicole headed straight for the master suite without a word. I poured myself a bourbon and sat in my workshop, surrounded by the tools that had built our life together. That's when the memories started flooding back, moments I'd dismissed or explained away over the past year. Like 3 months ago, when I'd surprised her with tickets to see her favorite band in Vegas. Instead of excitement, she'd sighed and said, "Trevor, I wish you'd asked first. I have important client meetings that weekend." She'd gone anyway, but spent the entire trip on her phone, barely acknowledging the expensive suite I'd booked, or the time I'd installed custom lighting throughout her design studio, worked weekends for a month, called in favors with electrical contractors, probably saved her $15,000. When I finished, she'd simply said, "It's fine, I guess," though I would have gone with different fixtures. Then there was the big one I'd been trying to forget. 6 months ago, at her company's annual gala, I'd overheard her talking to a group of architects and designers. When someone asked how she'd expanded her business so quickly, Nicole had said, "Honestly, having the right connections helps, but mostly it's about having vision and not settling for mediocre work." Not a single mention of the $100,000 I'd loaned her to lease the bigger studio space. Nothing about the wealthy clients I'd refer to her through my renovation projects. She'd made it sound like she'd built everything herself. I convinced myself she was just being professional, that she didn't want people thinking she'd gotten help. But now, sitting in my workshop with her words from the bar still echoing in my head, I was seeing a different picture. Nicole had been pulling away for months, treating me more like a convenient resource than a partner. The affection had dried up, the respect had vanished, and apparently, I'd been too busy working to notice. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike, my project manager. "Hey boss, everything okay?" Nicole seemed pretty harsh tonight. If my own employee could see it, how had I missed it for so long? I finished my bourbon and made a decision. Tomorrow, I was going to start paying attention to the woman I'd married. Really paying attention. Because something told me that scene at the bar wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the first time she'd stopped hiding what she really thought of me. The next morning, I found Nicole in the kitchen, acting like nothing had happened. She was sipping her usual green smoothie, scrolling through design magazines like she didn't have a care in the world. "We need to talk," I said, setting my coffee down firmly on the granite countertop I'd installed myself. Nicole barely looked up. "About what?" "About last night. About how you spoke to me in front of her friends." She rolled her eyes, that same dismissive gesture I was starting to hate. "Trevor, you're being way too sensitive. It was just a joke." "A joke?" I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady but firm. "Calling me an idiot in front of people I do business with is a joke to you?" "Oh my God," Nicole said, finally looking at me with obvious irritation. "You're really going to make a big deal out of this?" I was having a few drinks. I made a comment. "Get over it." That's when something inside me shifted. The old Trevor would have backed down, would have apologized for making her uncomfortable. But not anymore. "No, Nicole," I said, my voice carrying the same authority I used with difficult clients. "I'm not getting over it. That wasn't a slip-up from drinking. That was you showing everyone exactly what you think of me." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been thinking about how you've been treating me lately. The comments, the eye rolls, the way you act embarrassed to be seen with me." I crossed my arms, standing my ground. "When's the last time you actually showed me any respect, Nicole?" Her face flushed, but instead of apologizing, she got defensive. "Respect? Trevor, I live in this house you built. I support your work. I show up to your boring contractor events. What more do you want?" "I want my wife to not call me names in public," I said. "I want the woman I've financially supported for years to act like she values what I do." "Financially supported?" Nicole's voice rose. "Is that what you think this is? Some kind of transaction? Isn't it?" I shot back. "When's the last time you contributed equally to this household? When's the last time you treated me like a partner instead of a convenient ATM?" Nicole stared at me, clearly shocked that I was pushing back. For years, I'd been the accommodating husband, the one who kept the peace. But that man was done taking disrespect. "I think," I said slowly, "we both need to take a hard look at what this marriage has become." She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking away. I had work to do, and for the first time in months, that felt like the most important thing in my life. 3 days passed without Nicole and me having a real conversation. She'd leave for work before I got up, come home late, and spend her evenings locked in her home office working on urgent projects. The silence was actually a relief. It gave me time to think clearly about our relationship without her constant deflection and manipulation. But something was nagging at me. Nicole's sudden detachment, her increased hostility, the way she'd become so protective of her phone lately. I'd built my business on attention to detail, on noticing things others missed. And what I was noticing now didn't add up. Thursday morning, after Nicole left for her studio, I did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. I looked through her things. Her laptop was password protected, but I knew Nicole. She used the same password for everything. The name of her childhood dog plus her birth year. Sure enough, Bailey 1985 got me right in. What I found in her browser history made my blood run cold. Searches for how to leave husband financially secure, dividing assets in Arizona divorce, and starting over at 40. But it was the email account I didn't recognize that really got my attention. An account she'd apparently created just 3 months ago. I opened it, and there they were. Dozens of messages to someone named Marcus Rivera. The first few were professional discussions about a residential project she was supposedly working on. But they quickly became personal. Very personal. "Can't wait to see you tonight. T will be working late again, as usual. Nicole, last night was incredible. I keep thinking about your hands on me. Nicole, he's been so suspicious lately. Maybe we should be more careful. Nicole." I sat back in my chair, my hand shaking slightly. My wife of 12 years was having an affair. The woman I'd supported through her divorce, whose business I'd funded, whose lifestyle I'd made possible. She was sneaking around behind my back. But here's what really got to me: the timing. These messages started right around the time Nicole began treating me like garbage. She hadn't just fallen out of love with me. She found someone else and was too cowardly to end our marriage before starting something new. I printed every single message, methodically organizing them by date. Then I looked up Marcus Rivera. Turned out he was a real estate developer, recently divorced, with a reputation for expensive tastes and questionable business practices. The kind of guy who probably saw Nicole as a trophy, not a partner. I closed the laptop and headed to my workshop. I had some serious thinking to do about what came next. But one thing was crystal clear. The respectful, forgiving husband Nicole had taken for granted was about to become her worst nightmare. I spent the next 2 days doing what I do best, building a case with methodical precision. 20 years in high-end construction had taught me that the devil's always in the details, and I was about to use every detail against Nicole. First, I documented everything. Every email, every message, every lie she told me about working late. I created a timeline that showed exactly when her affair started and how it coincided with her increasingly hostile behavior toward me. Then I dug into Marcus Rivera's background. Turns out my wife had picked a real winner. The guy had been divorced twice, had a reputation for flash and no substance, and was currently being sued by 3 different contractors for non-payment. His last 2 development projects had gone bankrupt, leaving investors high and dry. But here's where it got interesting. I knew 2 of those contractors. They'd bid against me on projects before, and when I called them up for a friendly chat, they were more than happy to share details about Marcus's business practices. "Trevor, that guy's poison," said Danny Martinez, who'd lost 40 grand on Rivera's last project. "He promises the moon, then disappears when it's time to pay up." "How do you know him?" I told Danny I was considering a business partnership and wanted to do my due diligence, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was definitely doing due diligence. By Thursday afternoon, I had enough dirt on Marcus Rivera to bury him. But I wasn't done yet. I called my attorney, Brad Simpson, who'd handled the legal work when I incorporated my business. Brad was a straight shooter who'd grown up in construction before going to law school. "Brad, I need to understand my options if Nicole and I get divorced," I told him. "Jesus, Trevor, I'm sorry to hear that. What's going on?" I gave him the basics without mentioning the affair evidence yet. "I've been supporting her business for years. We own property together, and I want to make sure I'm protected." Brad walked me through Arizona's community property laws, explaining how assets will be divided and what documentation I'd need. Then he said something that made me smile. "Trevor, the good news is that any financial support you provided for a business before marriage, or any property you own before marriage, stays yours. Plus, if you can prove she wasted community assets on an affair." "What happens then?" I asked. "Arizona courts don't look kindly on that. She could forfeit her claim to a significant portion of the community property." After I hung up, I sat in my workshop, surrounded by the tools that had built my success, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. Nicole thought she was playing me for a fool, sneaking around while I bankrolled her lifestyle. But she'd forgotten one crucial thing about successful contractors. We always have a plan, and we always finish the job. Friday morning, I did something that would have seemed impossible a week ago. I smiled at Nicole over breakfast. "You seem better," she said, looking surprised. "Less intense." "I've been thinking about what you said," I replied, buttering my toast. "About needing space. Maybe you're right." Nicole's eyebrows shot up. This clearly wasn't the reaction she'd expected. "I've been working too much, focusing on business instead of us," I continued. "Maybe I should take some time to figure out what I really want." She nodded slowly, obviously trying to process this change in my attitude. That sounds healthy, Trevor." "In fact," I said, taking a sip of coffee, "I'm thinking about taking that fishing trip to Colorado I've been putting off. Remember? The one with Mike and the crew? Give us both some real space to think." The relief that flashed across Nicole's face was unmistakable. A week away meant a week of freedom with Marcus. No suspicious husband around to complicate things. "That sounds perfect," she said, a little too enthusiastically. "When were you thinking?" "Next week. Mike's been pushing for it anyway." I stood up, grabbing my keys. "I'll call him today. and set it up. As I headed for the door, Nicole actually looked happy for the first time in months. Trevor, I think this is really good for both of us. I turned back and smiled. Nicole, I think you're absolutely right. This is going to change everything. What she didn't know was that I had no intention of going to Colorado. Instead, I was going to spend that week documenting her affair, gathering evidence, and putting the final pieces of my plan into place. I drove straight to Mike's office at our construction headquarters. Mike Thompson had been my project manager for 8 years, and more importantly, he was loyal, discreet, and had no love for Nicole after watching how she treated me. Mike, I need a favor, I said, closing his office door. A big one. What's going on, boss? I told him everything. The affair, the evidence, my plan to use the fake fishing trip to gather more documentation. Mike listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. That woman's been using you for years, he said finally. What do you need me to do? I need you to actually go to Colorado, take some photos, post them on social media. Make it look like I'm there with you. Can you handle that? Mike grinned. Boss, after what she did to you at Murphy's, it would be my pleasure. I spent the rest of the day making arrangements. Private investigator to document Nicole's activities while I was supposedly away. Security cameras to monitor our house. Financial records copied and stored in a safety deposit box. By Sunday, everything was in place. Nicole thought she was about to get a week of freedom to carry on her affair. Instead, she was about to hand me everything I needed to destroy her world. Tuesday morning, while Nicole thought I was somewhere in the Colorado mountains, I was actually parked outside a coffee shop 2 miles from our house, watching the private investigators' reports come in through encrypted messages. The first photos arrived at 10:47 a.m. Nicole's BMW pulling into the parking lot of an upscale apartment complex in Paradise Valley. Marcus Rivera opening the passenger door for her, his hand lingering on her lower back as they walked toward the building. The timestamp showed she told me she was meeting a client at that exact time. By noon, I had video footage of them entering his apartment together. They didn't come out until 3:30 p.m., both looking disheveled, Nicole checking her reflection in her phone camera before getting back in her car. But the real jackpot came that evening. The investigator had positioned himself outside Rivera's building when Nicole returned at 7 p.m., the same time she texted me about working late on urgent design revisions. The photos from his apartment window were crystal clear. Nicole and Marcus embracing in his living room, her wedding ring clearly visible as her hands roamed over his chest. Then images of them on his balcony, sharing a bottle of wine I recognized, a $300 vintage from our own wine collection that had mysteriously disappeared the week before. I forwarded everything to Brad Simpson with a simple message. How's this for evidence? His response came back within an hour. Trevor, this is ironclad. She's not just cheating. She's stealing community property to fund the affair. Any judge in Arizona would award you significant damages. Wednesday brought even more damaging evidence. Credit card records showed Nicole had paid for a romantic dinner at the Four Seasons using our joint account, then spent the night at Rivera's apartment. The investigators' photos showed them checking into a suite at the Phoenician Resort. $800 per night room, charged to the business credit card I'd given her for legitimate design expenses. But Thursday's discovery was the one that really set my blood on fire. The investigator followed Nicole to a high-end jewelry store in Scottsdale Fashion Square. She emerged 45 minutes later with a small bag from Cartier. When I called the store pretending to confirm a purchase for tax purposes, they informed me she'd bought a $15,000 men's watch using our business account. That watch wasn't for me. I hadn't received any expensive gift from my wife in over a year. She was buying jewelry for her lover with money from my construction business. I called Mike at the job site. Mike, how are those Colorado photos coming along? Posted 3 more today, boss. Fishing shots, campfire pictures. Even got one of me holding up a trout with the mountains in the background. Anyone checking your social media would swear you're having the time of your life. That evening, I sat in my hotel room, surrounded by printed photographs, financial records, and legal documents. In just 3 days, I'd gathered enough evidence to not only prove Nicole's adultery, but also demonstrate that she'd been systematically stealing from our joint accounts to fund her affair. But I wasn't done yet. Tomorrow was Friday, and according to the investigators' intelligence, Nicole had planned something special with Marcus, a weekend getaway to Sedona, booked using my credit card, while I was supposedly still fishing in Colorado. She thought she was being clever, taking advantage of my absence to have a romantic weekend with her lover. What she didn't know was that I'd be watching every minute of it. Friday morning arrived with a text from Nicole that made me want to throw my phone across the hotel room. "Hey honey, Sarah invited me to a girls' weekend in Sedona. Last minute thing, but I could use the break. Hope the fishing is amazing. Love you." Sarah Chun, her business partner, was currently in New York at a design conference, something Nicole had apparently forgotten I knew about. The lie was so casual, so effortless. It made me realize how long she'd probably been deceiving me. I forwarded the message to my investigator with instructions to document everything about their Sedona trip. Then I did something that felt both satisfying and strategic. I called Nicole's mother. "Trevor, Patricia Williams had always liked me, treating me more like a son than an in-law. How's the fishing trip going?" "It's great, Patricia. Listen, I want to give you a heads up. Nicole's gone to Sedona for the weekend with some friends. I know you sometimes try to reach her on weekends." "Sedona? She didn't mention that when we talked yesterday. She said she was staying home to catch up on work." "Perfect. Another lie documented." "Well, you know, Nicole, sometimes these trips come up last minute." After I hung up, I felt a grim satisfaction. Nicole's web of lies was getting more complex, and soon it would strangle her. The investigators' reports from Sedona were devastating. Photos of Nicole and Marcus checking into L'Auberge de Sedona under the name Mr. and Mrs. Rivera, paid for with our business credit card. Images of them hiking Cathedral Rock, holding hands like newlyweds. Video footage of them at dinner, toasting with champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries. But Saturday's intelligence provided the final nail in Nicole's coffin. The investigator had positioned himself with a telephoto lens when Nicole and Marcus returned to their suite after dinner. The photos were explicit enough to leave no doubt about their relationship. But more importantly, they showed Nicole wearing the Cartier watch she'd bought him, confirming that our business funds had been used to purchase gifts for her lover. Sunday evening, as Nicole was supposedly driving back from her girls' weekend, I received a call from Brad Simpson. "Trevor, I've reviewed all the evidence. This isn't just adultery, it's financial fraud. She's misappropriated business funds, stolen community property, and used marital assets to fund an extramarital relationship. What's my next move, Brad?" Monday morning, we file for divorce and request immediate asset protection. With this evidence, she'll be lucky to get 20% of the community property, and she'll owe restitution for everything she stole. And the business, completely protected. Her affair-related expenses are considered waste of community assets. The courts will ensure you're compensated. That night, as I prepared to return home for the confrontation that would end my marriage, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete control over my situation. Nicole thought she'd spent the week outsmarting her oblivious husband, living her fantasy life with Marcus Rivera while I was supposedly catching trout in Colorado. Instead, she'd spent the week destroying herself, documenting her betrayal so thoroughly that no court in Arizona would side with her. Tomorrow, she'd wake up as a cheating wife with expensive tastes and a comfortable lifestyle. By tomorrow night, she'd be a soon-to-be ex-wife facing financial ruin and public humiliation. The hunting trip was over, and I caught exactly what I was after. Sunday evening, I returned home to find Nicole unpacking her bags in our bedroom, humming softly like she'd just returned from an innocent girls' weekend. She looked relaxed, satisfied, probably still glowing from a romantic getaway with Marcus. "Hey, honey," she said, giving me a casual kiss on the cheek. "How was Colorado?" "You look great." Colorado was enlightening, I replied, setting my duffel bag down carefully. "Very enlightening." Nicole continued folding clothes, chattering about her fake weekend with Sarah. "We had such a great time in Sedona. The spa treatments were amazing, and the hiking was just what I needed." I walked to my dresser and pulled out a manila folder filled with photographs. "Nicole, we need to talk." Something in my tone made her look up. "About what?" I spread the first set of photos across our bed. Images of her and Marcus entering his apartment, embracing on his balcony, checking into the Sedona resort as Mr. and Mrs. Rivera. Nicole's face went white. She stared at the photos for a long moment, then looked at me with shock and growing panic. "Trevor, I can explain, Dash. Can you explain this?" I interrupted, laying out the credit card statements, showing the Cartier watch purchase, the resort charges, the expensive dinners. Or maybe you can explain how our business account paid for your lover's jewelry. Nicole's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. I could see her mind racing, trying to find an excuse, a way to talk her way out of this. You want to know the truth about my fishing trip? I continued, my voice steady and cold. I never left Phoenix. I spent the week documenting your affair, gathering evidence, and preparing for this moment. I pulled out the final batch of photos, the explicit images from their hotel room, showing her wearing the watch she'd bought him with our money. 4 months, Nicole. 4 months of lying, cheating, and stealing from our marriage to fund your relationship with Marcus Rivera. Nicole finally found her voice. Trevor, please let me explain. It's not what you think, Dash. It's exactly what I think, I said firmly. You've been having an affair, using our money to pay for it, and lying to my face every single day. Tears started streaming down her face. I never meant for this to happen. Marcus and I, we just connected, and I felt so alive with him, Dash. So alive that you decided to steal $15,000 to buy him jewelry. So alive that you charged your romantic weekend to my business account. Nicole collapsed onto the bed, sobbing. Trevor, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can we work through this? Can we go to counseling? I looked down at the woman I'd supported for 12 years. The woman who'd thrown away our marriage for a con artist with a history of failed businesses and unpaid debts. Nicole, tomorrow morning my attorney is filing divorce papers. You have 24 hours to find somewhere else to live. You can't just throw me out, she protested. Actually, I can. This house was mine before we married, and thanks to your documented financial fraud, you've forfeited any claim to it. I gathered the photographs and headed for the door. Your boyfriend Marcus might want to start looking for a new sugar mama. After his creditors finish with him, he won't be able to afford the lifestyle you're accustomed to. As I walked out, leaving Nicole sobbing on our bed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete peace with my decision. 6 months later, I was sitting in my newly remodeled home office, reviewing contracts for the biggest project of my career, a complete renovation of a luxury resort in Scottsdale. The irony wasn't lost on me that my business had never been more successful. The divorce had been swift and decisive. Nicole's attorney had tried to argue for a 50-50 split of assets, but when Brad Simpson presented our evidence, their tune changed quickly. Financial fraud, adultery, and misappropriation of business funds had consequences in Arizona courts. Nicole received exactly what she deserved. 20% of our community property, no claim to my business or our home, and in order to repay the $47,000 she'd stolen to fund her affair. Her design business collapsed within 2 months when word spread about her conduct. Wealthy clients don't trust designers who steal from their husbands. Marcus Rivera had fared even worse. His restaurant empire imploded completely when his creditors discovered he'd been using an affair partner's stolen money to stay afloat. The man Nicole thought would be her meal ticket ended up filing for bankruptcy and moving back in with his parents in Tucson. But the sweetest justice came when Nicole tried to reconcile with her family. Her parents, who'd always respected me for supporting their daughter's dreams, were horrified when they learned how she'd repaid that support. Her father actually called to apologize for raising a daughter who could betray such loyalty. Trevor, he'd said during that difficult conversation, we're ashamed of what Nicole did to you. You were the best thing that ever happened to her, and she threw it away for nothing. Nicole had tried to contact me several times through mutual friends, claiming she'd made a terrible mistake and wanted another chance. Each time, I'd simply referred them to my attorney. Last month, I'd heard through Mike that she was working as a sales associate at a furniture store in Tempe, living in a studio apartment, and driving a 10-year-old Honda. The woman who'd once enjoyed a luxury lifestyle funded by my success was now discovering what life looked like when you had to earn it yourself. Meanwhile, I'd started dating again. Sandra Martinez, a successful architect I'd met through a client, appreciated a man who built things with his hands and understood the value of hard work. She treated me with the respect Nicole never had, and for the first time in years, I felt valued for who I was, not just what I could provide. This morning, I'd received a final piece of closure. Nicole's divorce attorney had called to inform me that she was officially dropping her appeal of the settlement. She'd finally accepted that her choices had consequences she couldn't escape. As I looked around my home office, expanded and improved since Nicole's departure. I felt grateful for the lessons she'd taught me, even if she hadn't meant to. Sometimes the people who betray you end up showing you exactly what you deserve, and it's usually much better than what you were settling for. The woman who'd called me an idiot in front of my friends had ultimately proven that the real fool was the one who threw away a good man's love for a fantasy that was always destined to collapse.